Reggie Fils-Aimé, the former president of Nintendo of America. I never got to make a video giving you a proper goodbye, and I think you definitely deserved it, because you were such a big part of Nintendo. Even though you didn't have any direct influence on the games like 𝗬𝗲𝗳𝗏 did, you still defined so much of that Nintendo charm. From your legendary memes such as, "My body is ready," or that time you had to leave because you had to go play Animal Crossing New Leaf for your Nintendo 3DS. There will never be another person at Nintendo that can carry the exact same purity and fun that you did. And I know we had our differences, mainly younger me complaining about Mother 3, and you burning some poor soul to death just for asking about it. But that's all behind us now. Enjoy your retirement, Reggie. We'll miss you. Man, what a guy. Nintendo won't be the same without him. The new guy has some pretty big shoes to fill, but I think we should give him a chance to... Wait, what was the new guy's name again? Oh no. Hey everyone, it is 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 and welcome back yet again for another new video. And today's topic will be covering a subject that I've pretty much covered almost every year since this channel has been around. And it is the yearly gaming event that is known as 𝗃𝗃. Yes, the Christmas of gaming has once again come around the corner, and it is that time of year for me to ramble on about it yet again. However, some of you may have noticed that while I'm always excited for 𝗃𝗃 just about every year, I've grown a bit more cautious of it over time. Because while the last few 𝗃𝗃s have had their moments, they haven't exactly been the best possible showings that Nintendo could put out. Some 𝗃𝗃s in the past have been really spectacular, and have showed off a lot of cool games and announcements, but other times 𝗃𝗃 has not come close to my expectations, and will many times end in numerous forms of disappointment. The recent example of this being last year, specifically for Nintendo. Well, because as you all know, Nintendo's 𝗃𝗃 is pretty much the main one that I focus on, being a channel that is mostly centered on Nintendo and Sonic the Hedgehog. But to be fair though, a big reason that I've ended up disappointed with a lot of their recent 𝗃𝗃s is because of the fact that I tend to shoot my expectations to very unrealistic heights. In the past, I saw 𝗃𝗃 as a time where anything could happen, where any game announcement was possible, no matter the logic and speculation of the actual possibility. And I will admit that it was a pretty foolish mindset to expect Nintendo to live up to, especially for a single event, even if it is as big as 𝗃𝗃. But at the same time, I feel like a big problem with Nintendo at 𝗃𝗃, and especially these last few years, is their 𝗃𝗃s have been disappointing even by basic standards, and mainly because they refuse to show anything besides a handful of big games. And I mean that literally, as in the digital event format years, they usually have at least 1 to 2 big games that carry nearly the entire show. 𝗃𝗃 2014, an okay 𝗃𝗃 with a couple of cool announcements, but it was mostly carried by Super Smash Bros. On Wii U and 3DS. 𝗃𝗃 2015, literally one of the worst years, because not only did they come to the show with a ton of underwhelming looking games, but their one big game that was hype, being Star Fox Zero, turned out to be a dud in the long run. 𝗃𝗃 2016, they literally came to this 𝗃𝗃 with only Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Pokémon Sun and Moon 2. And most recently, 𝗃𝗃 2018, an 𝗃𝗃 presentation where the first half of the show had a very underwhelming lineup, and the rest of the show was carried by Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So yeah, it's safe to say that 𝗃𝗃 hasn't been the absolute greatest thing when it comes to Nintendo. Now that's not to say that all these 𝗃𝗃s were bad, and that all the games that they did show were even worthless. A big example of this would be E3 2017, where that E3 actually did have a good amount of announcements in games, including the unexpected surprise reveal of 2 Metroid games. Yeah, safe to say that was a pretty good year. So factoring in all of this, I can't help but be both worried and excited for this year's E3 at the same time. And the reason for this is because Nintendo's 2019 E3 showcase has the potential to go either way. It could be a very hype event with a lot of cool things to show off, but it could also be a complete dud because they spent almost all of the show talking about one game. There's no real way to know, and it doesn't help that the speculation scene has only a little to go off of due to the lack of credible leaks and rumors over the last few months. And I feel like we shouldn't have to be this worried about a presentation at E3, one of the biggest gaming events to this day. There are ways to do a good E3 presentation, even if you don't have that many games. And that is the main thing we look for in an E3, the games, and the presentation of these games in clear and hype ways. And that's what Nintendo hasn't consistently mastered, I feel like, despite getting it right from time to time. And aside from the lackluster quality and pacing of the presentation themselves, with the games, I feel like Nintendo could do so much more when it comes to their game lineups within a single year. They are a billion-dollar company with loads of resources, including many talented developer teams, connections to third parties that they can outsource to, and much more. There's a lot more they can do to make sure that a year doesn't feel so dry and we have to constantly mouthwater from direct to rec on updates on games. But that's just what I think. Honestly, the discussion of how Nintendo handles their games is a discussion that could be its own video, so we will move on from that, for now. So let's re-aim our focus towards the main point of this video and what you all came for. My predictions, thoughts, and opinions on how Nintendo's E3 could potentially go, analyzing all of the potential games, and much more. So let's see how their E3 could stack out. Alright, so as I said earlier, I've had a bad history of shooting for the stars when it comes to my E3 predictions. So I think it would be better for myself and others if I held back on detailing things that aren't very likely. Mainly focusing on games we know for sure are going to be a thing and very common speculation, which I think is a key thing to think about with this upcoming E3, because honestly, I think a lot of the content of this year's E3 will be games that we already know about or we have heard about to some extent. 2019 is looking to be a pretty large size year for Nintendo, in the second half at least. The first half of the year was admittedly dry and didn't have many heavy-hitting games, but the second half is presumably going to be filled with a lot of Nintendo Switch titles that we have been speculating about for a while, such as the Generation 8 Pokemon games that we now know as Sword and Shield, or Fire Emblem, and much more. There are a lot of games that have needed more information for ages now, and they could be highlighted at this E3. And that's not even factoring some recently announced games, such as Mario Maker 2, and some potential new announcements at this E3. But I'm going to play it safe and say that a lot of this E3 will be blowing out information on existing game titles that we know well exist. And I mean, I'm sure there will be a new game or two announced in this E3 Direct. Announcing new games is pretty much an E3 standard. But the scale of these potential new game announcements is up in the air completely because it is such a packed year and there is a lot to talk about already. I especially see it being smaller titles if yet another game were to be slated for this year. It's just such a jam-packed year with a lot to talk about. Well, assuming that there are no delays. Which, oh boy, that's definitely a topic, because it's pretty much the main potential killer for this E3 and the whole year. Last year's E3 suffered from a few games getting delayed back a year, and it also suffered from the lack of information on a lot of the Switch titles that we are expecting at this E3. So if Nintendo were to pull that again, but with all these core titles that we are expecting for 2019, it will not be a pretty sight. I can say that much. So my big hope is that they at least don't drop the ball there, if anything else. I personally won't be looking for too many new game announcements related to next year, but if we don't get that and a lackluster presentation around games that should be releasing this year, Nintendo had better prepare for a storm from many fans who've been waiting for the Switch to get more worthwhile titles. But enough with the general talk. Now let's dive into the specific content of things that could be at this E3. We already have the major plans for Nintendo's E3 this year, which is structured in the format that they've done E3 for quite a while now, where we have a couple of competitive events with tournaments and their main E3 presentation direct, followed by some additional gameplay and smaller reveals with Nintendo Treehouse. And really, aside from looking forward to the direct, like I always do, the two tournaments do not really interest me. The tournaments are based on Smash Ultimate and Splatoon 2, and I personally feel that tournaments based around these two games seems kinda as their games have been out for a while now and only have had so much new content added to them over time. The more hype E3 tournament events by Nintendo have been ones that are more so based off of new games that have elements we've never seen before, such as that Smash 4 Invitational that showed us more of the game before its launch, or the event that showed us in-depth gameplay of Mario Maker for the first time. Though speaking of Mario Maker, we are getting an Invitational for that game, and it could be really hype if they bring in some pro players to try it out and show us some of the new kinds of levels that can be made. But I think this E3 could have just benefited from holding a big event like the Nintendo World Championships, and having games like Mario Maker 2 there. But that's just what I think. The tournaments aside, what really makes this overall E3 presence sort of strange is that we don't really know what the centerpiece game of the show will be. You see, usually at Nintendo's E3, they have a very specific game that they make the main focus of their show floor, and a big part of their E3 presentation. But we haven't really had a confirmation as to what game or games could the E3 be themed after. And it's hard to figure out because, again, we have multiple big titles that could be here. So it's arguable as to which of these big titles could rule the entire E3 show floor and most of the E3 presentation. Something like Animal Crossing could be a great game to show off due to its large anticipation, but it's not exactly a game series that will make everyone run across the E3 lot to play. Don't get me wrong, I understand that there are a lot of people excited to try this new Animal Crossing, but Animal Crossing is a very relaxing, and for lack of better words, casual type of game. It doesn't appeal to everyone. Mario Maker 2 would obviously be the biggest potential candidate because of the fact that it is a game starring the Nintendo Golden Boy himself, Mario, and it could demo well on the show floor in a similar way to its predecessor. Well, that's what I originally thought, but I always had a weird feeling about it being the main game, as it literally releases a few weeks after the E3 event. And one game that comes out like a few weeks from E3 and just ruling the entire show floor doesn't seem to make sense to me. Well, now what makes it even more unlikely is the fact that Mario Maker 2 just recently got its own Nintendo Direct outlining more details about the game. So I imagine that even if Mario Maker 2 has some new details left to explain, it isn't much that it's going to eat up the E3 presentation. So this leads me to believe that we could actually get a pretty balanced E3 showing this year, one that focuses on multiple big games than over-relying on a single big title, which would actually be really great because it's been something that the Nintendo fanbase has needed for a long while. A direct that features multiple games for multiple different types of Nintendo fans, so that the direct isn't so mixed on reception because a specific game of theirs wasn't showed off. Obviously, you can't appeal to every type of fan due to the vast amount of games people want, but an actual effort to diversify the lineup would be a step in the right direction. So this E3 for Nintendo is definitely in a strange status right now, and I cannot say for sure what the main focus of the event will be this year. so I guess we gotta wait and see. It's interesting on what Nintendo will do with their E3 presence because one of their competitors, being Sony, is kinda taking a step back from E3 this year. They've confirmed that they will not be doing a big press conference, and they don't really have much to show there. Obviously, if you followed the gaming speculation world, you'll know that it is likely because of the fact that Sony is gearing up for the PlayStation 5 behind the scenes. So probably in the next year or so, they will be back swinging, which makes this E3 all the more of an opportunity for Nintendo. They could completely rule it if they play their cards right. I mean, of course Microsoft will still be there doing God knows what, but besides them, E3 definitely is an open court this year, which makes my fear that they will choke horribly again all the more worrying. I mean, they won't even have big man Reggie by their side this time. All we got now is 𝗷𝗵𝗵𝗧𝗶𝗺. And let me tell you, man, I hope Doug really puts on a show in order to make a name for himself in the community. I mean, he kind of already has. His last name is literally Bowser, but we need a bit more than that. Oh yeah, and we already know that this E3 will primarily be focused on games for the basic Switch console that we've had since 2017. There were some rumors of some potential Switch revisions happening in the future, but Nintendo has confirmed that those will not be at this E3. And another thing to know, the 3DS is dead. In all seriousness, yeah, that system is done. No more first-party developed titles. Sad to see it go, but it was inevitable at some point. Now then, that just leaves us the lineup of these potential Nintendo Switch games and other additions that could come to the system as well. Games that could be there, things that could be shown off about them, lots of possibilities to discuss. So let's not waste any more time. Yep, and of course we're gonna start this bad boy off with a game series that Nintendo fans just can't get enough of, Super Smash Bros. And Smash Bros, when it comes to these big events, has definitely been a glass cannon. You see, dropping any new information about a Smash game is great, and it's almost always hype in some form. But Smash Bros is a game where, when it is at an event such as E3, Smash tends to overtake the stage, and sometimes it feels like Nintendo will give Smash a bit too much attention and let it overshadow some other games. But I feel like at the very least for this E3, that won't be happening. Smash Ultimate only ate up so much of last year's presentation because they had so much about this game that they could talk about. It was the reveal of an entirely new Smash game. Yes, I said new. Because even if it relied on the past elements of the series, it still had a lot of new to explain. It was basically a whole Smash Direct's worth of information. But right now with this game, we are in the DLC fighter phase, where we are getting characters added into the game with only a few other elements such as music and stages. That won't eat up the entire show, because it's just DLC. It's not a whole new game. And I feel like if Nintendo is smart, they won't let DLC carry almost an entire E3 show. Now as for the specifics for what we're going to see, it's very up in the air right now. But the most obvious and safest guess is that we will get the reveal of a new Smash character in some form. But I also have a feeling that they could reveal more than one character at this E3 if they really wanted to. And that is not unheard of at all. We've had Smash presentations that have revealed multiple characters in one sitting. It's just debatable for this E3 since we don't know how much time that could possibly eat up in the Direct itself. Though I wonder if these potential reveals would be in the Direct itself, or we would get these reveals elsewhere, be it in its own dedicated Smash Direct or at the Smash Tournament at E3 this year. Lots of potential ways that this could go. Now, I would try and make guesses as to who the specific characters could be, but I'm going to hold back on that for a couple of reasons. A, I've kind of taken a step back from Smash character speculation ever since the infamous Smash Direct that deconfirmed the Grinch leak and gave us freaking Piranha Plant as a Smash character. Yes, I'm still mentally recovering from that. And B, it'd make this video longer than it already will be, because I could be here all day talking about potential characters. Maybe another video. Now originally, this section of the video was basically talking about how it was weird that Mario Maker 2 was releasing so close to E3, and featured me speculating on how much of E3 will actually focus on the game. That was until a whole 15-minute Mario Maker 2 Direct got announced just as I was editing the original version of this video. So I had to scrap the original audio and script and start all the way over. Yeah, not fun at all. So now most of Mario Maker 2 information has been shown through that Direct, and that means that there is most likely not much else to show off. Meaning that if Mario Maker 2 does show up at the E3 Direct, it probably won't have too much time dedicated to it, as I said earlier in the video. However, what I didn't mention is the possibility of there still being some surprises left to show off with the game, as one mysterious loose end with the Mario Maker 2 Direct was the heavy implications that the game has one more new game style that could be revealed. So I can see that being a big E3 Direct reveal, but it could also pop up at somewhere else, maybe the Mario Maker 2 Invitational. Either way, the game will be out not too long after E3, so its unanswered questions will be revealed in due time. Yeah, I've honestly kind of lost interest with this new Fire Emblem game. Fire Emblem is a series that has sadly kind of not really had my full attention at all since Fire Emblem Awakening. And that's not to say the games after it have all been bad or something bold like that. Oh no, my thing is just, nothing about these more recent games has inherently dragged me back. It definitely has to do with how I haven't fully looked into a lot of these newer games, but it's just, I don't know man, I was never the biggest Fire Emblem guy to start. I'm obviously more into other franchises. So with Fire Emblem Three Houses, the game releases the month after E3. So while it's not Mario Maker 2 levels of close to the show, it is fairly soon after. So it's safe to say that the game could be at this E3 Direct, and we'll get a small trailer outlining some more details about it. Though I question how much more will be shown off, as they definitely have showed quite a bit already. Makes me wonder how much is even left to show without straight up going in the spoiler territory. But yeah, it's a game that's happening soon, and will hopefully be pretty good. Maybe the game could be so good it can reignite my interest in the Fire Emblem games. Who knows? Luigi's Mansion 3 is a game that was revealed last year, but has been dead silent in news since then. We really haven't seen anything else new about it aside from the little gameplay we got from the last time we saw it. So this is one of the games that will probably guaranteed be at E3, and I'm willing to bet that the game will be getting a near full blowout of information and details, including a potential new title, since we know that Luigi's Mansion 3 is likely a working title, just like how Luigi's Mansion 2 was a working title for Dark Moon. As for what we could specifically see from the game, I'm not entirely sure. There's a lot of different directions that they could go. But as I said in a Nintendo themed video prior to this one, I hope the game is basically the best of both worlds of its predecessors, taking the best of the original game and Dark Moon, and blending it into an experience that both fans of those games can enjoy. But I mostly hope it takes notes from the first one, as I really want a more console-driven focus. Luigi's Mansion is such an atmospheric game at times, and Dark Moon didn't necessarily always capture that, especially due to it being held back by the 3DS's power. The Switch is definitely a lot stronger, and I hope that they take advantage of that and make the game look a lot cleaner. It did look a bit rough when we saw it in that first trailer. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to it. Oh man, we are playing with some real fire here. Now, in prior years, I always saw Animal Crossing as a very casual and lesser important Nintendo franchise. One that not many people would lose their minds for and wouldn't be the biggest priority. Well, clearly that was a big mistake, because it turns out that Animal Crossing is actually one of the best-selling Nintendo franchises. And Animal Crossing fans have been viciously starving for a true new entry since New Leaf. Along the way, we've gotten smaller titles such as Happy Home Designer and Amiibo Festival, but Animal Crossing fans were having none of that. They want a real Animal Crossing game. It's been literally almost half a decade since the most recent mainline one. And honestly, I'm surprised it's taken this long for Nintendo to say or do anything about it. You would think that Animal Crossing isn't the most complex series out there to develop, and that it wouldn't take so stupidly long to make. But for some reason, the journey to the first true HD Animal Crossing has been a long one, and the frustration is understandable, considering that they didn't do a Wii U entry. It's like how I felt when I was waiting for Kirby's Return to Dreamland 2 on the Wii U, and we never got it. As for how I personally feel, I don't really care myself. I don't play Animal Crossing. I just know that if Nintendo gimps those fans out on news for Animal Crossing Switch again, and delays it or something, there's gonna be riots in the streets. I'm already cautious of those Animal Crossing fans after seeing the demon circles they was making to summon the announcement alone. There's no telling what they'll do from there. Shout out to my boy 𝗕𝗲𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀, by the way. Bayonetta 3 is a game that exists, I guess, but I have no clue what's going on with the development of it. I initially was under the impression that these games weren't all too hard to make, but clearly that was wrong because it's looking unlikely that it will even come out this year. Seems like the main reason that it hasn't dropped yet is that Platinum Games is juggling multiple game projects, such as Astral Chain and a few other titles. They are definitely one busy studio these days, but I do think Bayo 3 could be coming along well enough to where some new information could be at this E3. Maybe a new cinematic CGI trailer or something? I have no idea. Daemon X Machina is a game that exists, and so is a game called Town, which is a project being made by Game Freak. These are some games that are worth mentioning, I feel, but are not the biggest games in discussion of the community right now. I know Daemon X Machina had a demo or something not too long ago, so it is safe to say that the game is approaching soon. It could be at E3 with some new information, though I'm not entirely sure on Town. Speaking of Game Freak, that actually leads into the possibility of Pokemon Sword and Shield news. Yes, the Generation 8 Pokemon games that have had literally no type of news since their reveal direct. Yeah, these games have definitely had a dry as hell hype cycle for a Pokemon game. Probably the driest one since Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and that's not a good thing. To make a long ramble short, I just really hope these games are at least solid, and do a lot of interesting things to break the negative stigma towards the franchise in current times. Like yeah, we know that these games are not the big scale, Breath of the Wild tier games that revolutionized the franchise. I know a lot of people were expecting that, and the games not going that direction definitely killed the hype for some people instantly. But I still have faith that these games can be really solid ones, and can be a great Pokemon experience that reminds me why I love the franchise's traditional formula. Not every series needs to be in a rush to make a crazy leap in a dramatically different direction. But at the same time, that frustration of Pokemon not doing some things differently is understandable, because a lot of the games are starting to blend together due to Game Freak's hesitance to do more ambitious ideas with the franchise. It's a pretty controversial topic right now in the community, and one that warrants its own video for another day. So for our last few solid confirmed games, we have the Link's Awakening remake and a new Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. And honestly, I'm surprised that the Mario and Sonic Olympic series is even still alive, because I was sure that the last entry was the final one, due to its terrible quality and poor sales. But I guess it's here to stay for however long Sega and Nintendo want to keep it around. I just wish we would get a proper Mario and Sonic crossover already. Also, the music for this new one isn't as good as previous entries, and it doesn't have Dream Events finally back. Just end the sub-series and make the crossover already. As for Link's Awakening, I can definitely see us getting a new trailer or some small new details for that game. It's a remake of a Game Boy Zelda game, and a relatively smaller one. It won't take up too much time of the E3 Direct, as I imagine there's only so much changed about the game. And if it's not at E3 for whatever reason, it will probably be in a fall time Direct. Okay, and that covers a lot of the big games that are outlined for this year. Mainly the ones that we know are happening and will probably be at E3 in some form or fashion. Or I at least hope that most of these titles are there, as these games being in the latter half of the year is really what's going to determine how the year as a whole stacks out. I know that there were quite a few games that I left out, such as some indie games, some smaller eShop titles, some third-party ports, and all of that. Those are all also important things to factor, but for the sake of time, I will cut back my discussion on the specific for those, and will leave all that stuff to the comments and or social media. This discussion is mainly analyzing the main first-party stuff or anything else that I personally find interesting. So where does that leave us? Well, there are a few other possible titles that could be shown or announced at this year's E3, but their possibilities of being here are more up in the air. So for the next part of the video, I will say that you should take this part with a bit of a grain of salt as to whether these games will be at this E3 or not. And we're starting this off with something that will most definitely not be at this E3 in any shape or form. If we hadn't gotten the video detailing the game's delay, I would have assumed that Metroid Prime 4 was close to completion by now. But since that game has started over development completely with Retro Studios, it is safe to say that we won't be seeing anything of it for quite a bit. At least that's the general belief. Maybe in a year or so, we could get a cinematic teaser trailer, one that gives us a better idea of what the game is at least going to be about. But for now, the game is definitely in the back burner. Another question that this thing with Metroid Prime 4 opens up is, what the hell was Retro Studios doing in the past 4 to 5 years that they were missing? It seemed like they were clearly hard at work on a new game project or two before being put onto Metroid Prime 4. It's been years since their last game, and we have seen absolutely nothing come from it. Like, you're gonna tell me that Retro has been doing all this development work over the last few years, and it might have all gone down the drain? Just for them to go back to Metroid? I mean, I am happy that they are on Metroid Prime 4, but the thing with Retro kind of seems ridiculous, because I really hope that if Retro truly had been working on a project or two after all this time, something comes out as a polished game that can be shown off at this E3. There was definitely a lot of speculation as to what the game or games could have been. The most popular rumor being a Star Fox racing game of all things. But I just hope it was something that was worth the wait, or hell, just something at all, and not nothing. Well, if we're going to keep talking about frustrating waits for games, we might as well talk about the next game, which would be the fabled and long missing Pikmin 4. Pikmin 4 is a game that was supposedly quote-unquote near completion according to Miyamoto, but we haven't heard anything about it since then. I know that the common debate is as to whether Miyamoto had been referring to an actual Pikmin 4 or the Hey Pikmin spin-off game that happened on 3DS. But we later did get word that Pikmin 4 was definitely a game that does exist, and most likely for the Nintendo Switch now. But again, we have seen jack all and haven't had a single update on it. All I can say is that I hope the wait for this Pikmin game isn't as bad as the wait between Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 3, where we get a whole console generation skip till its final release. It is understandable how a Pikmin game could be harder to design than the average game, considering the complex workings of the Pikmin AI, the beautiful environments, and all the other stuff that makes the series so good. But the wait for this game is painful. At the very least, if it is some time away, give us an update saying so, and maybe give us a Pikmin Trilogy collection or something along the way, in order to make the wait for it less unbearable. So on the subject of a trilogy collection, that's a nice transition into our next set of games that could possibly show up. But these games are definitely the types that fall under that whole grain of salt thing that I was talking about earlier, because the basis for these games more so come from rumors than hard speculation with definitive evidence. Specifically, these games' main basis come from a leak known as the Best Buy leak, where the employee system of a Best Buy leaked the names of 3 upcoming Switch titles, and these 3 games have been quite the topic among the community. The first of these is a Metroid Prime trilogy, which is a very logical choice of games to be brought over to the Switch. Metroid Prime 4 is coming up, so it makes sense to put the original 3 games on the system. The main big question is more so not a matter of if the trilogy will happen, but when it will come and how will it look. It's been speculated that the trilogy had been planned to be a thing much sooner, but had to be pushed back due to the delay of Prime 4 itself. So maybe the trilogy is now something they are sitting on to use later for when we get closer to Metroid Prime 4. Another question is to whether this is a straight up port of the Prime trilogy pack from back on the Wii and Wii U, or if this is a full remaster of the trilogy, upscaling the games to HD and all of that stuff. It's really hard to tell what direction they might go for it. The next game on the list was a port of Persona 5, which is also not very much rocket science as to why that would come onto Switch. We just got Persona 5's protagonist Joker in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It would make sense that Nintendo might want his origin game available on the system, though there's been a lot of doubts to that recently because you would think that would be something they'd announce by now, being closer to Joker's Smash release date. I don't know, I'm probably still not buying a PlayStation anytime soon, so it would be a cool game to get, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on how that turns out. And the final game was that of A Link to the Past, which is strange because that's not Link's Awakening, that's a whole different 2D Zelda. This is probably the strangest listing of them all, and many people have wondered as to whether this was a mistake or if it could potentially be hinting at something bigger. Again, Link's Awakening is not really the longest Zelda game in the series, and it might be questionable as to if it's worth being sold alone for $60, even if it is a remake. So what if Nintendo is remaking another 2D Zelda in the form of this one and is bundling it in order to make the deal a little more appealing? It's definitely possible, but I wouldn't get my hopes up. So for the final notes on my prediction list here, I predict that we might get some updates to the Switch OS and or the announcement of another Wii U port. The potential of another Wii U port is both likely and unlikely at the same time. We know that they have been doing these ports since the Switch's launch, and there's a few more Wii U games that they could throw onto the Switch if they really want to, but I truly do feel like they've covered most of the big and necessary games. And I personally hope that we're going to see a rise in more original Switch titles. If we do get a port of a game, such as like Pikmin 3, it would be better, in my eyes at least, if it was bundled as a part of a Pikmin trilogy. I don't know, I've never hated ports as much as some other people, but even I feel like the Switch has relied on them a bit too heavily. And finally, the possibility of some actual freaking worthwhile updates to the Switch OS. Because holy moly, it is actually inexcusable how they've been doing nothing to improve the Switch as a system since launch. Almost nothing. We still don't have themes or improved online, we are still stuck with NES games as our only legacy titles, and so many other unaddressed issues. The Switch as a system is very bare bones and dry still, and it is actually stupid how they've made like baby steps towards fixing anything. I at least thought we would get themes by now. It's literally free money in itself. Like, my god, all of this is so easy to solve by now, but for some reason Nintendo is very hesitant on it. Well, rant aside, I think that covers about everything. There was a lot to unpack within this single video, which is usually the case for my E3 videos, so I apologize for that. But for those of you who have watched till the very end, I want to thank you for putting up with my rambling, and trust me, I know I can talk about these games for hours on end if need be. So in summary, Nintendo definitely has a good amount of games to where they can have a great E3 showing. But the big concern is as to which games will show up and how much new about them will we actually get. I personally think that the best case scenario is that we at least see all of the big 2019 slated games in some form, with maybe one or two cool smaller announcements like a long requested port or something, or even at least one big tease for a 2020 game. It would be nice if Nintendo did something cool for a certain series that's turning 30 this year, but we all know that's not happening. But again, the worst case scenario with this E3 is that a lot of these anticipated titles just get no new information at all, and we get left in the dark completely, leaving us to wonder as to whether any of them will get a delay or not, which wouldn't be a pretty thing because 2019 has already been dry as it is. So I give this E3 a 50-50 chance of success. I'm basically going to pray for the best and hope that Nintendo has learned their lessons from the past and will apply them to this E3 presentation. In other words, don't let us down, Bowser. Hey guys, 𝗧𝗪𝗃 coming back around to say that I hope you enjoyed the video. I apologize for my lack of uploads these days. It's been getting harder to find time to record, and it's been especially hard to fully come up with very well written scripts. So I'm in a bit of a struggle with YouTube lately, but I'm far from done with it. I know that with the lack of uploads, my Nintendo content especially has been dry, but hopefully this video has had enough Nintendo talk to satisfy you guys till we get to E3. And you already know how I plan to handle it. I will try my best to gather the Super Gaming Squad and we will do a full live reaction to the event. And if that doesn't work out well, my review video for Nintendo's E3 will still happen, and my full thoughts will be outlined there. Alright guys, that's pretty much it. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment giving me your thoughts on any of the topics, and subscribe to the channel if you are brand new to it for more shenanigans. This has been 𝗧𝗪𝗃, and I'm out. Peace.